This is the end, the death knell for Ajmal Amir Kasab.
Kasab to be hanged by the neck till he's dead.
It was the victory of good over evil, and Mumbai lost no time in celebrating it. The butcher of Mumbai was given a fair trial.
We did not create any Guantanamo. We did not create any military court.
Yes, indeed. Kasab must hang and hang fast. That's the overwhelming sentiment across the country. Welcome to Centre Stage on a historic day such as this. I'm Zaka Jacob. The question that's echoing from coast to coast in this country is this: how do we fast track the execution of the butcher of Mumbai? And how do we ensure that Kasab doesn't go the Afzal Guru way? But first, as always, up first on Centre Stage, the headlines that we're tracking right now. Mumbai celebrates the victory of good over evil. People burst crackers, distribute sweets in jubilation just minutes after the judge seals Ajmal Amir Kasab's fate. The Home Minister hails death to Kasab. He says the butcher of Mumbai was convicted on hard evidence and not merely on his confession.
I am proud of our system. We did not create any Guantanamo. We did not create any military court.
But there's still no closure for the 2611 victims. The families that Kasab ruthlessly destroyed cry no mercy. Close ranks to demand his immediate execution. Headlines Today expose rocks Parliament. Rajya Sabha MPs attack the government after Headlines Today digs out tapes showing A. Raja openly lobbying for the telecom portfolio. Raja says the voice is not his. An injury blow to Team India's 2020 World Cup hopes. Seamer Praveen Kumar is ruled out of the tournament because of a side strain. Rookie Umesh Yadav steps in to make up for the loss. Now, on the night of 26/11, Ajmal Amir Kasab was caught with an AK-47 and a bag full of ammunition. He had already killed 47 people, little children, young people, old people, without a trace of remorse. Today, he once again came face to face with death, this time his own. Inside the terror court, Special Judge M.L. Tehliani read out his final verdict. A packed room listened with rapt attention. It was death for the butcher of Mumbai. Headlines Today correspondent Vidya was there, and she now takes you inside the terror courtroom for a blow-by-blow account of the drama that unfolded there. Alright, tonight Mumbai will sleep tight. It took 17 months for this day to arrive, and finally Kasab has been sent to the gallows. For the victims, there is some sense of closure, but the fight is not over just yet. The chorus to hang Kasab right away is gathering steam. The victims are running out of patience. They want Kasab to be executed and be firmly put behind the memories of that dastardly attack.
Firecrackers burst, sweets distributed, tributes paid to the martyrs. This was the scene at Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus moments after the butcher of Mumbai, Ajmal Amir Kasab, was sentenced to death. There was a sense of vindication, of victory, as people celebrated at the very location where Kasab had gunned down so many lives.
बहुत ही खुशी महसूस हो रही है कि आज उसकी जिंदगी का फैसला कर दिया गया। पूरी दुनिया आज ये मंजर पे खुशी मना रही है। कैसा बहुत खुशी हो रही है हमें कि अजमल कसाब को आखिर फांसी दे दी गई है।
Though the sentencing has been welcomed by one and all, there are some who feel that just sentencing is not enough.
सही मायने में जीत उसी दिन महसूस करूंगा मैं जिस दिन इस दरिंदे को फिजिकली फांसी पे लटका दिया जाएगा। ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि ये फांसी सिर्फ इतिहास के पन्ने पे कागजों में दर्ज हो जाए और उन 316 लोगों की तरह इसको भी उस लिस्ट में रख दिया जाए जो कि
An opinion that is shared by the families of victims of 26/11. They want to see Kasab hanged and soon.
This is only beginning. Now he will go to Supreme Court and we should not give him the opportunity to go to the Supreme Court. Because as a Hemant Karkare's wife, I strongly feel that we should not give him this opportunity. We should hang him immediately. We should change the law for this type of terrorist attack and terrorist.
जिस दिन कसाब को फांसी हो जाएगी वो दिन सब शहीद परिवारों के लिए बड़ा खुशी का दिन होगा। जितने भी 26/11 के हमले में शहीद हुए हैं उनको सही मायने में उस दिन श्रद्धांजलि मिलेगी।
See, our system is not so rigid that you have to wait for 1 year for mercy petition. You have to wait for that. We have proved also in our ex-Prime Minister Mrs. Indira Gandhi's case. We have gone on a fast track, and then I think the judgment was executed in a very, very lesser time. So this case is much more important than that because it involves 166 Indian citizens.
It's been a wait of over 500 days for the families and for all of India to finally see Kasab being sentenced to death.
We are at it, the sentiments of the people are really respected and, under all logic, he deserves the punishment. The punishment is just and proper and it should be more.
It may be an even longer wait for them to see him being executed. But for the moment, the mere sentencing is reason enough for Mumbai to celebrate.
And that brings us to our big face-off question on centre stage tonight. We're asking, should Kasab's execution, now that he's been handed the death penalty, should his execution be fast-tracked? Joining us on the big debate tonight, Fali S. Nariman, Senior Supreme Court lawyer, joins us from his residence here in Delhi. We're also joined by Senior Supreme Court Advocate Prashant Bhushan. Also joining us from Mumbai, Senior Criminal Lawyer Majid Memon. It's a legal-heavy panel tonight. Also joining us from Mumbai are two victims who were directly affected by 26/11, Harish Chandra Srivadhankar and Devika, who could possibly be the youngest victim of 26/11. Let me start with you, Mr. Nariman. The growing chorus across the country is, yes, Kasab has been sentenced to death, but how do we ensure that his execution is fast-tracked? It's already taken 17 months for the court to arrive at this decision to convict him and hand him the death sentence. How do we ensure that the execution happens as soon as possible?
Well, that's a very, very tall order because he has certain rights, as every accused person has a right. First to get it confirmed by the High Court, and then perhaps if he wants to go to the Supreme Court, and all that takes quite a long time. So the fact that he's been handed a death sentence doesn't mean that he is executed pronto. I mean, that's not the way our system operates. And that is because the death penalty is given only in the rarest of cases and with some reluctance, normally. Of course, in this case, it was obvious that that was the harshest punishment and that could have been handed up to a person who was accused.
But Mr. Nariman, what about a sense of closure? What about a sense of closure for the victims? Today, the Home Secretary of the country, G.K. Pillai, was on this channel and he said he doesn't expect the legal proceedings to be finished anywhere between 12 to 24 months. If that is the case, then we're not looking at an execution any time before 2012, which means it would have been, what, almost 4 years since 26/11 happened.
Yes, that is so. That is so. Executions don't take place like this. In some other countries they do pronto because there are no appeals. So, I mean, you can't treat this as a different case, bar all appeals and execute him straight away. I mean, if that were possible, that possibly would be done. But that's not the way we function. In a rule of law country, we don't function like that. In a rule by law country, they function like that.
Prashant Bhushan, isn't there a way to fast track the execution process? There are countries in the West where, for example, terrorism crimes are tried in less than a year and executions take place in less than a year. Why can't the law of this land try and introduce improvisations, particularly in cases such as this, where the death sentence has been handed out now, surely there must be a way to fast track the execution.
In fact, most civilized countries in the world, particularly European countries, have abolished the death penalty precisely for the reason that we are seeing today. We are seeing today in this country a hanging frenzy, a frenzy of retributive violence. You are saying that hanging him quickly will bring a sense of closure. This is all being driven by a sense of retributive violence, a culture of violence which is promoted by this kind of penalty, death penalty. And that is why death penalty has been abolished, because it has been found that death penalty does not deter persons, especially those who are suicide terrorists, who have come to lose their lives, prepared to lose their lives anyway.
No, Mr. Bhushan, then what then should be done with someone like Kasab? If he shouldn't be sentenced to death, and if you believe that's not a deterrent, then what should be done to people like him?
Yes. He should be sentenced to life imprisonment. That would be a bigger deterrent for a person like him who had come prepared to die anyway in this operation.
No, but how would that be in any way a better deterrent or a bigger deterrent?
Pardon?
How would life imprisonment in any way be a bigger or better deterrent than death?
No, the death penalty is not a bigger deterrent, and that is why it has been, that is one of the reasons why it has been abolished in most civilized countries, because it has been found that it doesn't really deter people who are prepared to commit such heinous crimes any more than life imprisonment. The prospect of life imprisonment is as big or... Yes.
All right. Okay, Majid Memon, I want you to respond to what Prashant Bhushan has said. This is a raging debate between lawyers on the one side and human rights activists on the other, and somewhere down the line the human rights activists believe there is a certain logic in this. Guys like Kasab have come here prepared to die anyway. It's not like the death sentence is going to deter future Kasabs. Does the death sentence have any efficacy in such a case, Mr. Memon?
No, first I must make it very clear that Prashant Bhushan's argument is valid in a debate whether India should retain capital punishment or abolish it. That's a separately different debate which can be discussed for hours. But then today your question seems to be that once Kasab has been handed down death sentence on a piece of paper,
that's right,
whether execution should be promptly done or not is the, of course that's the call of the day. The whole nation and people who are enraged and who have expressed tremendous amount of anger and resentment over what Kasab did, and today they have heaved a sigh of relief that yes, ultimately this dreaded person has been handed down a death sentence. But as the girl said, when the pronouncement, a young girl, a young tender-aged girl said that I would not rest till he lives. Now, of course, this was widely publicized, and it touches the heart. Now, once the death sentence has been awarded, I am not going into the argument whether capital punishment should survive or not. I am on this point that once death sentence has been given to a man who has been found guilty of multiple murders and waging war against the nation, the two most gruesome offences, he does not simply fall under the rarest of rare case, as Fali Nariman says, but I would even go one step further and say that among the list of rarest of rare case also it would top.
Okay, I want to go across to those two victims of 26/11. Mr. Memon, I'll come back to you in a moment. I want to go to Devika and to Harish Chandra Shrivadankar. I'll start with Devika. Devika, आप ये बताइए, आज की जो फैसला कोर्ट ने सुनाई है, इससे आप खुश हैं? इससे आप सहमत हैं कि कसब को मौत की सजा मिलनी चाहिए?
आज कसब को सुनाया है कि फांसी का सजा, तो उसमें मैं थोड़ा खुश हूँ। जब उससे फांसी हो जाएगी तो मैं बहुत खुश होंगी, क्यों अपने इस देश का दुश्मन है, ऐसे आतंकवादी को फांसी ही होनी चाहिए। इसलिए मैं पढ़ लिख के ऑफिसर बननी चाहती, अपना देश का रक्षा करनी चाहती और ऐसे आतंकवादी को खत्म करना चाहती मैं। और कल आज जो फांसी का सजा है उसको सुनाया है, इसलिए मैं निकम साहब और जज साहब को नमस्ते करती हूँ कि उससे फांसी की सजा सुना दिया आपने। उसको फांसी का होने चाहिए, क्यों जो अपना देश का दुश्मन है। और मेरा एक तमन्ना है, जिस दिन मुझे गोली लगा था मेरे पापा ने वो जूता पहना था, वही जूते से दो कस के उसके मुंह पे मारेगी, फिर उसके गले में पहनाएगी, और भी मेरे आंखों के साथ उसका फांसी होनी चाहिए।
हरिश्चंद्र श्रीवर्धनकर, आप भी सहमत है, आप भी खुश है आज के कोर्ट के फैसले से कि कसब को सजाए मौत दिला जाए?
हाँ सर, जो हमारे जाबाज सिपाही मारे गए 166% मारे गए, आज जितने भी इंजर्ड है उनको सही तरीके से न्याय दिलाया गया ताइलानी साहब के जरिए और उज्जवल निकम साहब के जरिए, तो मैं शुक्रगुजार हूँ उनका कि तो सही। लेकिन जो अभी अमल जो है फांसी देने का वो जल्द से जल्द किया जाए, क्योंकि अपनी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में देर लगेगी, लेकिन उससे भी अगर जल्द से जल्द उसको सजाए मौत दी जाएगी तो सबको मतलब सही मायने से सबको श्रद्धांजलि होगी।
Okay, Prashant Bhushan, I want you to respond to that. I mean, here you have two victims. One is an 11-year-old. She's the youngest, arguably the youngest victim of 26/11, who's been directly affected. She's got a bullet wound still in her leg, and she says, as long as Kasab is alive, it will not satisfy me. In fact, I concur with what the court has said, that he should be given the death sentence, and only, I mean, the victims are not in a position to forgive this man.
You see, this is precisely the reason why death penalty has been abolished in most civilized countries, especially European countries. If you see this 11-year-old victim, one feels sorry that this kind of hanging frenzy, which has been promoted by the media also in this case, has led even this little girl to bay for the blood of somebody, to say that he should be hit with her shoes in front of her and hanged in front of her. What kind of mentality are we promoting? We are asking 11-year-old children in this country
with all due respect, she was directly affected by 26/11. She's a victim of 26/11. She still, even today, has that bullet wound in her leg.
Teach her. No, that's all right, but what do we want to teach her? Do we want to teach this kind of culture? That, look, you bay for the blood of people? This is not the object of punishment in criminal law. The object of punishment in criminal law is deterrence and reformation, not retribution. We are promoting a culture of retributive violence.
Do you believe, though, Prashant Bhushan, that a hardcore terrorist like Kasab will reform?
No, whether he reforms or not is a different issue, but certainly the maximum deterrent that you can give to a person like that is really life imprisonment.
No, today in fact the judge in his order, sir, even cited the example of Kandahar. He said keeping someone alive like Kasab could even lead to potential Kandahars in the future where you'll have to trade off terrorists.
So does it mean that he should have been shot and executed immediately after he was arrested? During these 18 months also there could have been a Kandahar, and Kandahar does not mean that you have to release. That's a decision of the government, whether to release or not to release. The government doesn't have to release a terrorist because of Kandahar. Kandahar can happen, even worse things can happen.
Fali Nariman, the whole debate that Prashant Bhushan has started off saying, what is the efficacy of giving death to a man who had come prepared to die anyway? Will that in any way deter potential Kasabs in the future?
I don't think that is a correct argument. I disagree. You see, so long as our law does have death as the worst punishment or as the strictest punishment that is to be given, then in a case like this, that is the punishment that has to be given. Now, the problem is a sociological one, namely victims all feel that why the hell should they go in appeal, and why should all these law processes take so long, and why should ultimately the Supreme Court say yes, he should be hanged, and then it goes to the president and so on and so on. But these are, as I said, processes in a rule of law country which we all have to live with, and that's perhaps an education that has to be spread around. Because if you believe in a rule by law country, then
Mr. Nariman, let's leave the processes. All right, we've got a law of the land. There are judicial processes that need to be met before a person can be executed. All that is fine. But what about the moot question of whether death is a deterrent itself to a terrorist?
Yes, death is a deterrent. I'm sorry. death is a deterrent to a terrorist, I believe it is. And the way in which apparently, according to some, I think it was your channel which said, the way he broke down when the death sentence was announced shows that it was a deterrent. I have no doubt that it is. And in fact, if you don't mind, just 1 minute, when I defended the death penalty as Solicitor General, the very first time I defended the death penalty as Solicitor General in the 1970s, before Chief Justice Singhvi, I remember him saying as Chief Justice, because he comes from the Punjab, that in the Punjab, if you abolish the death penalty, there will be killings all round, there will be vendettas all round. I mean, that was his view. And I've always found that people from the border states are prone to impose the death penalty, people from the non-border states are prone not to impose the death penalty.
Prashant Bhushan, you want to respond to that? I don't know what it means, but the fact is, when the death sentence was read out to Kasab today in court, he cried, he broke down. Do you believe that it still is not a deterrent? I mean, that he couldn't have possibly been afraid of death or the death sentence?
Look, I mean, I don't know why he broke down, but a person who has come prepared to die, clearly he had come prepared to die. Let's take those 9/11 terrorists. They had clearly flown their aircraft into the building. Today we are seeing a specter of increase in the culture of suicide terrorism in the world. In fact, this has arisen precisely because of this whole war on terror, which many people in this country are now calling for, that there should be a war on terror on the same lines as the US. This, in fact, far from decreasing the number of terrorists, has greatly increased the number of suicide terrorists in the world. Today, people are willing to commit suicide for an act of terrorism across the world every day. That's precisely because of this misguided war on terror, which has led to the victimization of a large number of innocent people, which has ultimately led to this. Unless we address the root causes of the problem, we will not be able to deal with this kind of suicide terrorism. This death penalty is certainly not going to deal with it.
That's a different debate altogether. Majid Memon, now that the order has been passed by the court and the death penalty has been handed, we believe that Afzal Guru's mercy petition number 28, pending before the President of India, at the rate at which it's going, his execution, even if it happens, will not happen before 2012. Kasab will be petition number 29. Surely there must be some provision in the law, and if there isn't, then there has to be some improvisation in the law to ensure that this process gets expedited.
You see, now, as I said, since the promptitude with which this trial has exceptionally been concluded, all of us have witnessed this, it must follow up as regards the execution of the final order. Now, reference before the High Court could be placed immediately. The High Court is closing for about 4 weeks for vacation now, but I expect that soon on 7th June, when High Court opens, immediately this matter can be placed before the learned division bench of the High Court, who can decide it in a matter of a fortnight maximum, because I don't think there is going to be a very detailed argument on behalf of Mr. Kasab. Now,
some people are suggesting, Mr. Memon, that the proceedings before the High Court will not happen before the month of July. We'll wait and see how that plays out. We're also joined now by Dr. Abhishek Singhvi, Rajya Sabha MP and national spokesperson of the Congress Party. Dr. Singhvi, the overwhelming sentiment across the country and amongst the majority of our guests on the show tonight is also that now that the death penalty has been handed out to Kasab, how do we ensure that the legal proceedings, the further legal proceedings, are expedited as soon as possible? The Home Secretary, G.K. Pillai, was on headlines today saying that he doesn't expect the legal proceeding to be finished anywhere between 12 to 24 months. Is there any way to expedite this process? Because a lot of it depends on the government of the day as well.
Let me make a few quick points. You have a very valid question. It's a very legitimate and a valid concern. But if you have done the primary trial with logistics which are staggering, by the way, thousands of pages, number of witnesses, cross-examination, delaying tactics by lawyers, etc., you've yet achieved a result in effectively less than a year. Other things have taken a little more than a year. I think there's no reason to be pessimistic for the future. Thirdly, I don't agree, and I think this is very important for your viewers to understand, that excessive hurry may be counterproductive. We are today proud of the Indian democracy, which in 1 year, 1.5 years, has given to Kasab precisely what he wants to deny to everybody else in the world: a fair trial, a fair crack of the whip. Having done that in a proud democracy and a proud judicial process, you can't short circuit too many things, because if you short circuit too many things in the following proceedings, you will actually diminish your democratic stature and your judicial stature.
Now, how long do you
However,
expect further legal proceedings to
there is
take?
no cause for pessimism. There are two levels of future trial. Well, I think a year is certainly a realistic estimate, minimum, because you
Okay.
have a mandatory confirmation from the High Court, then a Supreme Court proceeding. So minimum a year is fair. Beyond that, I can't say. I repeat, I don't think that as far as the judicial process culminating in a final decision of the Supreme Court, remember, provided Kasam appeals to the Supreme Court,
Okay.
should not be unduly long, probably well less than 2 years.
So Dr. Singhvi, you're
very good. I don't
assuring
think,
our viewers on
we
Headlines
need to
Today
try
tonight
to be
that
seen to be fast-tracking it.
Kasab will not go the Afzal Guru way.
Now you're asking a totally different question. Afzal Guru,
No,
what you're
all I'm asking you is, it will not take 5 years to execute Kasab once the Supreme Court passes its judgment. That's all I'm saying.
Let me explain. Let me answer your question. Now, it's a totally different question you're talking of. Assume that Kasab has reached the Supreme Court, if he files an appeal there, and he is convicted. These are two obviously speculative assumptions. But after that stage is reached, and it's very premature to talk about it, clemency lies in a totally different realm, nothing to do with the courts.
Okay.
Now, a clemency procedure, let me tell you, Kasab's case is not cast in stone as part of any queue. The Home Minister has not said that Kasab's case is part of a queue or is cast in stone. We have, as the UPA government, inherited a list, if I may call it a backlog, of people on clemency row or death row of over 1920 persons. But Kasab stands on a different footing as far as reaching the clemency is concerned, because that's a totally new process.
Okay,
And
sir,
even the old
I'm really sorry to interrupt you. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but we have to wrap up the show at this point of time. I'm really sorry to interrupt you again, Dr. Singhvi. We have to wrap up at this point of time. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Singhvi, Fali Nariman, Majid Memon, Prashant Bhushan, and of course the victims of 2611, Devika and Mr. Srivadankar. Hopefully, we'll take what Mr. Abhishek Singhvi said about this process not taking more than a year. Hopefully, this will be wrapped up in a year, because that seems to be the overwhelming sentiment across the country. We'll wrap up Center Stage of this edition right here. Up next, we'll continue with the other big story of the day. Headlines Today's telecom expose rocking the corridors of Parliament. Rajya Sabha MPs attack the government after Headlines Today digs out tapes showing A. Raja openly lobbying for the telecom portfolio. That's coming up next. Rahul Kanwal will be here in a moment.